I started designing when I was 10. My mom basically, when she was teaching me how to knit and crochet, taught me how to work without a pattern and to just doodle and have fun with it. So I've been pretty fearless in that regard, like my entire time in the craft. I am Samantha Piskevich, but everyone outside of my hometown calls me Pixie. I am a knitter and crocheter, like first and foremost. Those are the skills that I have, I think, to some degree mastered, although I'm dabbling in a bunch of other techniques these days. My mom, who taught me how to do knitting and crocheting, she designs most of what she makes. And when I was a kid, she would make these like really crazy hat decorations. And so she'd have like big sun hats that were covered in like knitted and crocheted sea creatures. She did a couple of those. She had one that was like flowers and bumblebees. Some of them she kept and wore until they wore out. She worked as a dog walker for 5 years, and she always had like a decorated hat. Like, you would describe her and every single person in town knew exactly who you were talking about. It's fun. So some of them she like just wore until like they were so sun bleached that they were like falling apart. And others she sold through charity events, which is, I think, part of why that seemed like a good option for me. Is like she's been doing that my entire life, and I did that with some of my earliest work. And at that point, it was like, oh, the really cute 7-year-old has like things they've donated and are selling. We want her stuff, as opposed to them being like, oh, the quality is amazing, but. No, it's been kind of like a long tradition to if I'm not gonna keep something, to find a new home for it via that method where someone gets a nice little donation out of it. This is my first ever project, like serious project. It is bright red because I gave it to my grandmother and it was her favorite color. I think my mom helped me start it and like may have helped with like the final edging and the handle, but like at least 80% of this was me. There are definite mistakes in it if you look at it, but like that's part of the character of it. Like I made this when I was 7. My mom and I spotted it when we were clearing out my grandparents' house after they passed away, and I was able to bring it home, and so it is forever part of the permanent collection that I will keep. Yeah, it's a special piece. So this is one of the best things I designed on my own in high school. And I really love this piece because I had a design mentor. She was an elderly woman who lived down the street who my mom knew how to sew, and my mom was a dog walker and she was having health issues, and so they made this deal that like my mom would walk her dog and I would get some basic sewing lessons. And only after that did my mom find out that she was a former FITM instructor for pattern making. So Annette knew her stuff. But I was going to make this design in just this off-white color. Because my inspiration was like traditional lace shawls and tablecloths, and so I was like, I'm gonna make a skirt inspired by that, and I'm gonna make it in ecru. And she was like, you're insane, like make it in an interesting color. And we had this whole like fight about it. And she was correct. So I ended up choosing some bright colors, and the piece is far more interesting because of it. It's not quite like my current style, but it was an important part of kind of like my artistic journey for sure. Yeah. When I'm designing, I usually draw from techniques that I already know, but part of when I'm choosing some of these like patterns that I've made that were designed by other people, sometimes those are specifically chosen because I want to learn a technique that they used, or they used a technique in a way that I had never seen before, and so I wanted to like really understand how they constructed whatever they did there. I've definitely at times designed things without having a solid foundation in the technique, and sometimes that has mixed success. I think one of the things about knitting is like with a lot of these pieces, if you make mistakes, you can rip back and redo your work and do it correctly. And a lot of knitters and crocheters struggle to do that. And that's something that my mom ingrained in me really early on, is that like you enjoy the process and like don't get caught up in negative feelings if you decide you really want to do it better than what you did originally. Like it's okay to rip back and redo it. And so I will frequently, if I'm particularly these days, so I'm using another designer's pattern as a starting point and making some significant modifications, I will try out whatever I'm doing and then sometimes rip back and like redo it to better match what my vision was. And that's just part of the process. But also I really like this idea of taking this like traditional thing that is often thought as being outdated and modernizing it. And often that's as simple as using a bright color. Like I have a couple pieces I'm going to show you that are Victorian era patterns, and you'll be able to see that, but like you wouldn't necessarily think that immediately without me telling you, because the colors are not Victorian era colors for that kind of work. People are used to thinking about shawls as being like ecru. In graduate school, got back into entering all of my pieces into like small local fairs, sheep and wool festivals, the state fair, all of that good stuff, just because it's fun. My friends thought it was really cool. My PhD advisor one year went to the state fair and took a photo of like my piece with a ribbon for whatever I had entered that year and like emailed it to me. Like it was very cool that my science world was so invested in my success at the state fair. It was amusing. I really try to emphasize to people that science and art are very interconnected. Particularly for me, I've been a knitter and crocheter since I was like 7. And I've been doing science research since I was 16. I was very lucky to have a teacher who set me up with some crazy opportunities when I was in high school. And the longer I'm in science, the more I realize that I'm good at the textbook knowledge of science. But the thing that makes me like really successful in my career is that I have this art background and this training that gives me the mindset of you try something and you think you make your hypothesis that it's going to give you a certain result. But when you don't get that, you learn everything you can from the process of what you did. And then you iterate and you see if you can be better the next time. Or sometimes you get a really weird result that is not at all what you expected. But if you really think about it, you can spin it off in a new direction and capitalize on it and find excitement in what some people would perceive as a failure. Like it's really just a problem that the way science is taught in schools is that like it's very like yes or no answer questions. Like there's one answer to everything in your typical science class. And AP testing is like that as well, kind of encourages that and encourages teachers to teach like that. And that's really just, it's not how actual science research works. And there's a shocking number of like very talented scientists that have extensive technical knowledge of some artistic craft. And that's informs who they are as a scientist. I feel like that's not seen a lot. And it's something that I wish more kids knew. You can do whatever artistic thing you want and have it benefit you in like a science career. I think it's good evidence of that. Like I started entering competitions in high school to put it on my college applications. The first admissions officer to read my application at the college I went to is a crocheter. And so like I showed up and she was like, I remember your application essays because I talked about like one of the craziest projects I did in high school is we read A Tale of Two Cities in my English literature class. And I was like, There's a woman who knits code into lace shrouds. Oh, I'm doing that. And so I developed, like, I took Morse code, I turned it into a knit stitch pattern, and I took a section of text from that book and translated it into a knitting pattern and knit a scarf for my English teacher. And that's the thing that stood out on my application essays for Caltech. It's an asset that people don't realize is an asset in the tech world. It's called frogging when you take an abandoned project and rip out the yarn. I don't know why, but that's just the terminology in the community. I occasionally have a project like that. I usually don't have too many in-progress projects at a time. I tend to be relatively monogamous with my projects and see them through. Although I'm changing that a little bit now that I'm starting to deal with arthritis, and so I have a bunch of different projects going on, but they're all in different crafts. So it still kind of feels like I haven't committed to too many things, even though I'm doing a lot more things. So this is a very basic sewn tote bag that I started in high school and finished here at ACE. So this is one of the things that I started while working with my sewing mentor, who really drilled it into my head that if I was going to spend hundreds of hours on something, it should be in an interesting color. You can tell that even back then I was all about the fun colors. She just kind of had to give me permission to break from some of the traditions of doing things in basic neutral colors. Sewing machines are, the one I have is from the 70s, so it's metal and heavy and a little finicky, and I love it dearly because it has great sentimental value from working on it with my design mentor when I was in high school, but it's not the best for actual sewing. And so it's very nice to be able to come into ACE and use machines that are regularly maintained and have all of the new features that are very nice. Also the space just has lovely lighting, and yeah, it's been great to have this as a new resource. I keep it all. I actually have the first version of this backpack. The straps are super stretched out. That was the reason why I really had to retire it. But it's in a drawer in my room. I have a drawer in my room that is pieces that have gone into retirement. And some of them are pieces I've made. Some of them are pieces family members made for me that once, the fabric is starting to get worn to a certain point, you want to prevent further damage, but I go into that for inspiration. And it's also just there's lots of memories associated with this stuff. I keep my worn out pieces, and they just kind of go into retirement. And I also, I feel like a lot of people, when you give them a handmade piece like one of these, they're really worried about wearing it out. And for a lot of the stuff I've made, if you have taken the best care of it you can and you're still wearing it out, that means you've loved and appreciated it. I'm good with that. And I have to remind some of my loved ones sometimes that it's okay. That's part of the point, to kind of gain that love through a little bit of wear and tear. Yeah. Mm-hmm.